On Christmas night, 1996, the Ramsey family returned to their lavish Boulder, Colorado home after attending a festive gathering with friends. John and Patsy Ramsey, along with their 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, and her older brother, Burke, settled in for what should have been a peaceful night. The Ramsey household was known for its charm and affluence, nestled in a community that epitomized safety and security. Little did they know their lives were about to be shattered by an unimaginable tragedy. In the early hours of December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey awoke to start her day. But instead of the peaceful morning she anticipated, she was met with a sight that would haunt her forever: a ransom note left on the stairs demanding $118,000 for the safe return of her daughter, JonBenét. The note, oddly specific in its demands, was chilling in its precision and length, spanning nearly 3 pages. It was an unusual and perplexing document that immediately raised suspicions due to its strange phrasing and the amount of money requested, a figure that eerily matched John Ramsey's recent work bonus. Panicked, Patsy quickly called 911 at 5:52 am, frantically reporting her daughter's disappearance and the discovery of the ransom note. The police arrived shortly after, but their initial response was marred by a series of critical missteps that would later be heavily criticized. The crime scene was not properly secured, and friends and family were allowed to move freely throughout the house, potentially contaminating crucial evidence. As the hours ticked by, the hope that JonBenét might be safely returned began to fade. The ransom note had instructed the Ramseys not to contact the police, yet they did, a decision that the family likely agonized over in those frantic moments. By 1 p.m., after a cursory search by the police had turned up nothing, John Ramsey and a family friend decided to conduct a more thorough search of the house. It was then, in the basement, that John discovered the lifeless body of his daughter concealed behind a closed door. JonBenét had been brutally murdered, her body showing signs of strangulation and a severe head injury. Her hands were bound and her mouth was covered with duct tape. This discovery marked the beginning of one of the most infamous and perplexing murder investigations in American history. The sight of the tiny beauty queen's broken body in such horrific circumstances sent shockwaves through the nation, instantly turning the Ramsey family into the focus of an intense media storm. The once peaceful home had become a crime scene, and the image of JonBenét, dressed in her pageant attire with her bright smile, would become etched in the public consciousness as the face of a tragic mystery that, to this day, remains unsolved. The initial hours of this investigation were chaotic and marred by errors that would plague the case for years to come. The discovery of JonBenét's body within the home itself raised immediate questions. How could an intruder have slipped in and out undetected? Or was the tragedy somehow connected to someone within the house? These questions would fuel endless speculation, and the tragic events of that night would lead to a saga filled with twists, turns, and controversy that has captivated and horrified the public for decades. In this opening section, we set the stage for a deep dive into the complexities of the JonBenét Ramsey case, a story of a bright young girl, her shattered family, and a mystery that has withstood the test of time. As we journey through the details of this case, we'll explore the various theories, the evidence, and the lingering questions that continue to surround the tragic death of JonBenét Ramsey. The chilling discovery of JonBenét Ramsey's body on the afternoon of December 26, 1996, is a moment that has been etched into the annals of true crime history. After a long, tense morning that began with the discovery of a ransom note and a frantic call to 911, the Ramsey family's worst fears were confirmed when John Ramsey found his daughter's body in the basement of their Boulder, Colorado home. The search for JonBenét began with hope that she was still alive, but as the hours passed, that hope began to dwindle. After the police and family friends searched the main levels of the house without finding any sign of the 6-year-old, John Ramsey, accompanied by family friend Fleet White, decided to search the basement, an area that had been largely overlooked earlier in the day. The basement was a labyrinthine space divided into several rooms, some of which were used for storage. As John Ramsey opened the door to one of the less frequently used rooms, his world collapsed. There, lying on the cold concrete floor, was JonBenét, partially covered by a white blanket. Her wrists were bound above her head with a nylon cord, and her mouth was sealed with duct tape. A garrote made from a piece of cord and a broken paintbrush handle was tightly wound around her neck, a cruel and brutal device that had been used to strangle her. The sight was too much for John Ramsey, who immediately tore the duct tape from his daughter's mouth and attempted to untie the cord from her wrists, but the knot was too tight. He then picked up JonBenét's lifeless body and carried her upstairs, shouting for help. The scene was one of chaos and heartbreak as Patsy Ramsey collapsed in grief and the police and first responders realized the gravity of the situation. The condition in which JonBenét was found raised immediate red flags for investigators. The presence of the garrote suggested a calculated and deliberate act of violence. The use of items found within the house, such as the paintbrush handle from Patsy Ramsey's art supplies, indicated that the killer had spent a significant amount of time inside the home. Additionally, the basement window was found slightly ajar, but there was little evidence to suggest a forced entry, further complicating the investigation. The police who arrived on the scene were faced with a complex and distressing crime scene. The basement, where JonBenét's body was found, was dimly lit and cluttered with storage items, creating an eerie and oppressive atmosphere. The officers quickly realized that this was no ordinary kidnapping case. It was a brutal murder that had occurred right under the noses of the family and the authorities. As John Ramsey carried JonBenét's body up from the basement, the already compromised crime scene became even more difficult to manage. In their grief and desperation, the Ramseys and their friends had unknowingly disturbed potential evidence, making the investigators' job even more challenging. The discovery of JonBenét's body in such a condition not only shattered the Ramsey family, but also set the stage for one of the most controversial and perplexing murder investigations in American history. The discovery in the basement was just the beginning of a long and painful journey for the Ramsey family. As they were thrust into the national spotlight, their every move scrutinized by the media and the public. The case, with its many twists and turns, would become a haunting mystery, with the basement scene serving as the grim focal point of a crime that remains unsolved to this day. The ransom note found in the Ramsey home on the morning of December 26, 1996, is one of the most puzzling and infamous pieces of evidence in the JonBenét Ramsey case. It was a bizarre, three-page letter that both perplexed investigators and fueled endless speculation about the nature of the crime and the identity of the perpetrator. The content and peculiarities of the note. The note, written on a pad of paper that belonged to Patsy Ramsey, was discovered on the staircase by Patsy herself. It demanded a ransom of $118,000, a curiously specific amount that matched the exact value of John Ramsey's recent Christmas bonus. This odd specificity immediately raised suspicions that the author was someone familiar with John's finances. The letter itself was unusually long for a ransom note, spanning 2.5 pages, which is highly atypical in kidnapping cases where notes tend to be brief and to the point. The tone of the note fluctuated between threatening and almost conversational, with phrases like, "We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction," and "You will withdraw $118,000 from your account," creating a disjointed and confusing narrative. Moreover, the note included oddly theatrical references, such as, "We respect your business, but not the country that it serves," and concluded with the ominous phrase, "Victory, SBTC," a cryptic acronym that has never been definitively decoded. This kind of phrasing led some investigators to suspect that the note was intentionally deceptive, designed to mislead the authorities about the motive and identity of the writer. Theories regarding the note's authorship. The peculiarities of the ransom note have given rise to multiple theories about its authorship. One prevailing theory is that the note was a deliberate red herring crafted to suggest a kidnapping when, in reality, the crime was something else entirely. The overly detailed instructions, the specific ransom amount, and the dramatic flair of the language led some to believe that the note was written by someone within the household or by someone who had intimate knowledge of the family's affairs. Handwriting analysis was conducted on several individuals, including Patsy Ramsey, whose handwriting bore some similarities to the script in the note. However, the analysis was inconclusive, with experts unable to definitively match the handwriting to any known individual. This ambiguity has left the note's true author unidentified, further complicating the case. Another theory posits that the note was written after JonBenét's death as a way to cover up what had actually happened. This theory is supported by the fact that the notepad used for the note was found in the house and practice notes were discovered on the same pad, suggesting that the author had time to draft and revise the letter. If the note was written after the fact, it would imply that the crime was not premeditated and that the author was improvising under pressure. The sheer length of the note, combined with its unusual content, has also led some to speculate that it was part of an elaborate staging effort. Critics of the investigation have argued that the note's peculiarities were overlooked in the initial stages, with too much focus placed on the family as suspects, rather than considering the possibility of an intruder who was trying to mislead the investigation. The suspicion and impact of the note. The ransom note is often cited as one of the most suspicious elements of the case, particularly because of its length and the specific amount of money demanded. Experts in criminal psychology and law enforcement have pointed out that the note's verbosity is highly unusual and inconsistent with typical ransom notes, which are usually concise and direct. The detailed instructions, such as not calling the police and waiting for a call to deliver the money, further complicated the case by suggesting a kidnapping scenario that was not consistent with the discovery of JonBenét's body. The note's existence and the way it was found also contributed to the immediate suspicion that fell upon the Ramsey family. Many have questioned why a kidnapper would leave such a detailed note in the house if they had already taken JonBenét with them. The fact that the note was left inside the house, rather than outside where it could be found without entering the crime scene, has fueled theories that the note was part of a staged scene. In conclusion, the ransom note remains one of the most enigmatic and controversial pieces of evidence in the JonBenét Ramsey case. Its peculiarities have sparked numerous theories and have kept investigators and the public alike guessing for decades. Whether it was written by an intruder or someone within the household, the note's true origins remain shrouded in mystery, adding yet another layer of complexity to this tragic and unresolved case. The autopsy conducted on JonBenét Ramsey revealed a tragic and brutal end to the young girl's life. The official cause of death was determined to be asphyxia by strangulation combined with a severe head injury. The strangulation was caused by a garrote, a device made from a nylon cord and a broken paintbrush handle, which was tightly wound around her neck, cutting deep into her skin. This indicated that the garrote was used with considerable force, suggesting a deliberate and calculated act. In addition to the strangulation, JonBenét had suffered a significant head injury. The blow to her head caused an 8.5-inch fracture that ran from the top of her skull to the base. The force of this injury was so severe that it could have been fatal on its own, but it was the strangulation that ultimately led to her death. The sequence of events, whether the head injury or strangulation occurred first, remains unclear, adding to the complexity of the case. The autopsy also uncovered other injuries that have fueled ongoing speculation. There were abrasions on her body, including what appeared to be marks from a stun gun on her back and face. Some investigators believe that a stun gun was used to incapacitate JonBenét before she was killed, although this theory has been debated. There were also signs of sexual assault, with the coroner noting vaginal injuries that suggested some form of assault. However, whether this assault occurred during the murder or was evidence of prior abuse is still a matter of intense debate. These findings have led to various theories about the motive behind the murder and the identity of the killer. One of the most significant pieces of evidence from the autopsy was the discovery of unknown DNA in JonBenét's underwear and under her fingernails. Despite extensive testing over the years, this DNA has never been matched to any known individual, including the Ramsey family or anyone else associated with the case. The presence of this unknown DNA has been central to the intruder theory, which suggests that an unknown assailant entered the house and committed the crime. However, the limited amount of DNA and its degradation over time have made it difficult to draw definitive conclusions. The findings from JonBenét's autopsy have driven the investigation for decades, offering clues but also complicating the search for the truth. The combination of strangulation, head trauma, and possible sexual assault paints a disturbing picture of a violent and premeditated crime. These elements, along with the presence of unknown DNA, have kept the case shrouded in mystery, fueling countless theories and keeping the public's attention on this tragic and unresolved case. The initial investigation into JonBenét Ramsey's murder by the Boulder Police Department has been widely criticized for a series of errors and missteps that many believe compromised the integrity of the case from the very beginning. These mistakes, combined with the intense media scrutiny that followed, have left a lasting impact on the investigation and have fueled ongoing debates about how the case was handled. One of the most significant criticisms of the Boulder Police Department's response was the mishandling of the crime scene. When officers first arrived at the Ramsey home after Patsy Ramsey's 911 call, they failed to properly secure the house. Friends, family members, and even clergy were allowed to move freely throughout the residence, potentially contaminating vital evidence. This lack of control over the crime scene meant that any forensic evidence that could have been crucial in identifying the perpetrator was likely compromised, making it much more difficult to piece together what had happened that night. Adding to the issues was the initial focus of the investigation, which was heavily directed toward the Ramsey family themselves. From the outset, the police appeared to operate under the assumption that someone within the household was responsible for JonBenét's death. This focus on the family, rather than exploring all potential leads and suspects, has been criticized as a premature and narrow-minded approach. The Ramseys were subjected to intense scrutiny, and while this is not unusual in cases where a child is murdered in their own home, the police's apparent tunnel vision led to a situation where other possible avenues of investigation were neglected. The police also faced criticism for their failure to adequately explore the intruder theory. This theory, which suggests that an unknown individual entered the home and committed the crime, was not given sufficient consideration in the early stages of the investigation. Evidence that might have supported this theory, such as the open basement window and unidentified footprints outside the house, was not thoroughly investigated at the time, further limiting the scope of the inquiry. Another critical error was the decision to allow John Ramsey to search the house for his daughter, which led to the discovery of JonBenét's body. When John found his daughter's body in the basement, he immediately picked her up and carried her upstairs, which not only disturbed the crime scene but also potentially destroyed key forensic evidence. This action, though understandable from a grieving father's perspective, should have been prevented by the officers on the scene to preserve the integrity of the investigation. The investigation was also marred by infighting and a lack of cooperation between the Boulder Police Department and other agencies, including the District Attorney's Office. This discord led to a fragmented investigation, with critical information not being shared effectively between the different entities involved. The media frenzy surrounding the case only exacerbated these issues as leaks and rumors began to overshadow the actual investigation. In summary, the Boulder Police Department's handling of the initial investigation into JonBenét Ramsey's murder was plagued by a series of critical errors that compromised the crime scene, focused too narrowly on the family, and failed to explore all potential leads. These mistakes have had long-lasting consequences, contributing to the ongoing mystery and controversy surrounding the case and leaving the true events of that tragic night shrouded in uncertainty. In the aftermath of JonBenét Ramsey's murder, intense suspicion quickly fell upon her immediate family, John and Patsy Ramsey, and their 9-year-old son, Burke. This suspicion was fueled by several factors, ranging from the unusual circumstances of the crime to the behavior of the Ramseys in the days following the tragedy. These suspicions not only shaped the direction of the investigation, but also left a lasting impact on the public's perception of the family. One of the primary reasons the Ramsey family came under scrutiny was the nature of the ransom note found in their home. The note was highly unusual, not only for its length spanning 3 pages, but also for its content. The amount of ransom demanded, $118,000, matched the exact amount of John Ramsey's recent Christmas bonus, leading investigators to suspect that the author of the note was someone with intimate knowledge of the family's finances. Additionally, the note was written on Patsy Ramsey's notepad using a pen from the house, which suggested that the note had been written inside the home rather than being brought in by an intruder. The discovery of JonBenét's body inside the family home further heightened suspicions. It is statistically uncommon for a kidnapper to leave a ransom note and then murder the victim within the home. The fact that JonBenét's body was found in the basement, hidden behind a door that had been overlooked during the initial search, raised questions about whether the crime could have been committed by someone within the household who knew the layout of the house intimately. The Ramseys' behavior in the days following JonBenét's death also came under intense scrutiny. Rather than cooperating fully with the police, the Ramseys hired a team of high-profile attorneys and public relations experts, a move that many interpreted as an attempt to shield themselves from suspicion. This decision, coupled with their initial reluctance to be interviewed separately by the police, fueled public and media speculation that they had something to hide. Patsy Ramsey, in particular, faced significant suspicion due to her role as the last person known to have seen JonBenét alive. Some investigators theorized that Patsy may have accidentally caused JonBenét's death, perhaps in a fit of anger or during an argument, and then staged the scene to look like a kidnapping gone wrong. This theory was partially based on the handwriting analysis of the ransom note, which some experts believed bore similarities to Patsy's handwriting, although this evidence was never conclusive. Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's older brother, was also scrutinized despite his young age. Some theories suggested that Burke, who was 9 years old at the time, may have been involved in his sister's death, either accidentally or intentionally, and that the parents then covered up the crime to protect him. However, there was little concrete evidence to support this theory, and Burke was eventually cleared of any involvement by both the police and district attorney. The intense focus on the Ramsey family significantly influenced the direction of the investigation. From the beginning, the Boulder Police Department operated under the assumption that someone in the family was responsible, leading them to overlook or dismiss evidence that could have pointed to an intruder. This focus on the family not only strained relations between the Ramseys and law enforcement, but also diverted attention away from other potential leads that might have resolved the case sooner. The scrutiny faced by the Ramsey family in the wake of JonBenét's death has had lasting repercussions. The public's fascination with the case was fueled by the idea that a seemingly perfect family could be hiding dark secrets. This narrative was perpetuated by the media, which often portrayed the Ramseys in a negative light, further cementing public suspicion. Despite being officially cleared by DNA evidence in 2008, the cloud of suspicion has never fully lifted, and the case remains one of the most controversial and debated in true crime history. The intruder theory in the JonBenét Ramsey case posits that an unknown assailant entered the Ramsey home on the night of December 25, 1996, and was responsible for the brutal murder of JonBenét. This theory is supported by several pieces of evidence that suggest an outsider may have been involved rather than someone within the household. One of the key pieces of evidence supporting the intruder theory is the open basement window. During the investigation, detectives discovered that a small window in the basement was slightly ajar, with a suitcase positioned directly beneath it. This window could have provided an entry point for an intruder, particularly given that it was located in a less frequented area of the house. Additionally, there was a scuff mark on the wall beneath the window and a piece of glass on the suitcase, which some investigators interpreted as signs of forced entry. However, critics argue that the basement window was too small for a grown person to easily navigate and that there were no clear footprints in the snow outside, though this detail remains contentious. Another critical piece of evidence is the presence of unidentified DNA found on JonBenét's body. DNA was discovered on JonBenét's underwear and under her fingernails, which did not match any members of the Ramsey family or anyone else who had been tested in connection with the case. This DNA has been a cornerstone of the intruder theory, suggesting that someone outside the household may have been involved in the crime. Advances in forensic technology have allowed for more detailed analysis of this DNA, yet the identity of the person to whom it belongs remains unknown. The fact that this DNA does not match any known individuals in the Ramsey family has led some investigators to argue that the presence of an intruder is the most plausible explanation. The autopsy also revealed small, circular marks on JonBenét's body, which some experts believe are consistent with the use of a stun gun. These marks, found on her back and face, have led to the theory that an intruder used a stun gun to subdue JonBenét before killing her. The presence of these marks is significant because it suggests that JonBenét was incapacitated in a way that would be difficult to explain if the attacker was someone in the household. The stun gun theory was strongly advocated by Lou Smith, a detective hired by the Boulder District Attorney's Office who believed that these marks were clear evidence of an intruder. Additionally, there was an unidentified footprint found in the basement near JonBenét's body that did not match any shoes owned by the family. This footprint, along with the open window and the unidentified DNA, has been used to argue that someone from outside the Ramsey home was responsible for the crime. Despite this evidence, the intruder theory has been met with skepticism, particularly given the lack of physical evidence linking a specific individual to the crime. Critics point to the fact that no clear footprints were found in the snow outside the house, though this detail is debated due to conflicting reports about the weather conditions that night. Others argue that the family's behavior and the unusual nature of the ransom note make the intruder theory less plausible. In conclusion, the intruder theory remains one of the most debated aspects of the JonBenét Ramsey case. While evidence such as the open basement window, unidentified DNA, possible stun gun marks, and an unknown footprint suggest the possibility of an outsider's involvement, the lack of conclusive evidence and the many unanswered questions have kept this theory from being universally accepted. The mystery of who killed JonBenét Ramsey continues to captivate the public, with the intruder theory standing as a key component of the ongoing debate. The JonBenét Ramsey case became one of the most sensationalized and widely covered news stories in American history, and the media's role in shaping public perception and potentially influencing the investigation cannot be overstated. From the moment the story broke, the case was thrust into the national spotlight, with every detail of the Ramsey family's life, every development in the investigation, and every theory about what happened being scrutinized, often to the point of distortion. The media frenzy surrounding the case began almost immediately after JonBenét's body was discovered. The image of the young beauty queen, dressed in her pageant attire, quickly became emblematic of the case and was plastered across newspapers, magazines, and television screens around the world. This image, combined with the affluent background of the Ramsey family, helped to capture the public's interest, but it also contributed to a narrative that often leaned more toward entertainment than factual reporting. Sensationalism played a significant role in the media coverage of the case. News outlets, eager to keep the public's attention, frequently focused on the most lurid and shocking aspects of the story. Theories about the family's involvement in JonBenét's death were given extensive airtime, often with little evidence to support them. The unusual ransom note, the discovery of JonBenét's body in the family home, and the family's decision to hire legal and public relations experts were all presented in a way that suggested guilt even before any formal charges were considered. This created a public perception that the Ramseys were somehow involved, a narrative that was hard to shake despite later developments in the case. Misinformation was another significant issue in the media's coverage. In the rush to report on new developments, many outlets published unverified or incorrect information. This included inaccurate reports about evidence, misleading statements from unofficial sources, and speculative stories that were presented as fact. For example, early reports suggested that there were no signs of forced entry into the Ramsey home, which bolstered the theory that the crime was an inside job. However, this was later called into question as more information about the open basement window and other potential points of entry came to light. The media's portrayal of the Ramsey family was often harsh and critical, which influenced both public opinion and the investigation. The intense focus on John and Patsy Ramsey, in particular, led to widespread belief in their guilt, even as evidence began to emerge that pointed toward other possibilities. The constant media scrutiny made it difficult for the family to defend themselves, and it arguably pressured investigators to consider public opinion in their handling of the case. This media driven narrative had a direct impact on the investigation. The Boulder Police Department, already under pressure to solve the high profile case, may have been influenced by the widespread belief in the family's guilt. This could explain why the initial investigation was so focused on the Ramseys to the exclusion of other potential leads. The media's role in shaping this narrative likely contributed to the early missteps in the investigation, including the mishandling of evidence and the decision to treat the family as primary suspects from the outset. In summary, the media played a crucial role in the JonBenét Ramsey case, not only in informing the public, but also in shaping the narrative that has surrounded the case for decades. Sensationalism, misinformation, and the intense scrutiny of the Ramsey family all contributed to a public perception that influenced the investigation in significant ways. The case remains unsolved, but the media's role in how it was perceived and pursued is a critical part of its enduring mystery. The grand jury investigation in the JonBenét Ramsey case is one of the most intriguing and controversial aspects of the entire saga. Convened in September 1998, nearly 2 years after JonBenét's death, the grand jury spent months reviewing evidence, hearing testimony, and deliberating on whether charges should be brought against the Ramsey family. The grand jury's findings, which were not made public until years later, recommended charges against John and Patsy Ramsey. However, these charges were never pursued by the Boulder District Attorney's Office, leading to widespread speculation and debate. The grand jury was tasked with examining a vast array of evidence, including forensic reports, expert testimony, and the various theories that had been proposed about what happened on the night of JonBenét's death. After a thorough review, the grand jury concluded that there was sufficient evidence to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges of child abuse resulting in death. The specific wording of the indictment suggested that the Ramseys were not accused of directly killing their daughter, but rather of placing her in a situation that led to her death, and then covering up the circumstances. Despite this recommendation, the district attorney at the time, Alex Hunter, chose not to pursue charges against the Ramseys. This decision was highly controversial and remains a point of contention to this day. Hunter stated that he did not believe there was enough evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the standard required for a criminal conviction. He argued that while the grand jury might have found sufficient probable cause to indict, this did not necessarily mean that a conviction could be secured at trial. Hunter's decision not to prosecute was influenced by several factors. First, the forensic evidence was inconclusive, with the unknown DNA found on JonBenét's body not matching any of the Ramseys. Second, there were significant concerns about the integrity of the crime scene, which had been compromised early in the investigation. Third, the lack of a clear motive and the complexity of the case made it difficult to present a straightforward narrative to a jury. The grand jury's findings were kept secret for many years, leading to much speculation about what had transpired behind closed doors. It wasn't until 2013, after a successful legal challenge, that the indictment was made public. This revelation reignited debate about whether justice had been served and whether the decision not to prosecute the Ramseys was the correct one. In summary, the grand jury in the JonBenét Ramsey case recommended charges against John and Patsy Ramsey, believing there was enough evidence to indict them for child abuse resulting in death. However, the district attorney chose not to pursue these charges, citing insufficient evidence to ensure a conviction. This decision remains one of the most debated aspects of the case, contributing to the ongoing mystery and controversy that surrounds JonBenét's tragic death. In recent years, there have been renewed efforts to solve the JonBenét Ramsey case, driven by advancements in forensic technology and a fresh review of the evidence by the Colorado Cold Case Review Team. These efforts represent the latest chapter in a decades-long investigation that has captivated and frustrated investigators and the public alike. One of the most significant recent developments is the digitization of the extensive evidence collected over the years. The Colorado Cold Case Review Team, in collaboration with the Boulder Police Department, has created a searchable database that includes over 21,000 tips, 1,000 interviews, and samples from more than 200 individuals, including DNA, handwriting, fingerprints, and shoe prints. This digitization effort is critical because it allows investigators to more efficiently cross-reference and analyze the vast amount of data that has accumulated since JonBenét's death in 1996. The creation of this database marks a significant step forward in managing the case's complex and voluminous evidence. Another major aspect of the renewed investigation is the application of modern DNA testing techniques. Advances in forensic science have allowed for more precise analysis of the DNA evidence collected at the crime scene. In 2023, new DNA tests were conducted on evidence that had previously been examined, as well as on newly tested items. The results of these tests, while not publicly disclosed, have reportedly given investigators hope that they might finally identify JonBenét's killer. The use of cutting-edge technology, including genealogical databases, is being considered as a way to trace the DNA back to potential suspects, much like in other high-profile cold cases that have been solved in recent years. The Cold Case Review Team has also generated new investigative leads based on their comprehensive review of the case. This team, which includes experts from various law enforcement agencies and forensic disciplines, spent a year analyzing the case file and making recommendations for new avenues of investigation. While the specifics of these recommendations have not been made public, they represent a focused effort to re-examine the case with fresh eyes and modern tools. The Boulder Police Department has indicated that they are actively pursuing these leads and exploring how the latest forensic advancements can be applied to the evidence. These recent efforts reflect a continued commitment to solving the JonBenét Ramsey case despite the passage of nearly 3 decades since her murder. The combination of modern technology, thorough re-evaluation of evidence, and the persistent determination of investigators may yet yield the answers that have eluded them for so long. As the cold case team's work continues, there remains cautious optimism that this tragic mystery might one day be resolved, bringing closure to JonBenét's family and justice for the young girl whose life was so tragically cut short. Lou Smith, a seasoned detective with a long and respected career in law enforcement, was brought into the JonBenét Ramsey case by the Boulder District Attorney's Office in 1997, several months after the initial investigation had begun. His involvement in the case brought a new perspective as he quickly became a strong advocate for the intruder theory, a viewpoint that sharply contrasted with the prevailing belief within the Boulder Police Department that the Ramsey family was involved in the crime. Smith's investigation began with an open mind, but he soon grew convinced that the evidence pointed to an unknown intruder rather than a family member. One of his key contributions was his meticulous examination of the crime scene and the evidence, which led him to identify several points that he believed had been overlooked or misinterpreted by the police. One of the critical pieces of evidence that Smith focused on was the open basement window. While the police had largely dismissed this as a possible entry point, Smith believed that it was a viable route for an intruder to have entered the home. He noted the presence of a suitcase under the window, which he theorized could have been used as a step by the intruder to climb back out. Additionally, Smith pointed out the scuff mark on the wall beneath the window and the broken glass, which he argued were consistent with someone climbing in or out through the window. Smith also highlighted the unidentified DNA found on JonBenét's clothing and under her fingernails. He argued that this DNA did not match any member of the Ramsey family and was likely left by the true perpetrator. Smith believed that this evidence strongly supported the intruder theory, as it suggested the involvement of an unknown individual who had physical contact with JonBenét. Another crucial aspect of Smith's investigation was his interpretation of the stun gun marks on JonBenét's body. Smith believed that the small, circular marks found on her back and face were consistent with the use of a stun gun, a device that could have been used to incapacitate JonBenét without leaving obvious signs of struggle. He argued that this evidence further pointed to a premeditated attack by an intruder who came prepared with a kidnap kit that included the garrote, stun gun, and other tools. Smith was highly critical of the Boulder Police Department's focus on the Ramsey family, which he felt had led them to ignore or downplay evidence that did not fit their theory. He publicly voiced his concerns, stating that the police were allowing their suspicion of the Ramseys to guide the investigation rather than letting the evidence lead them to the truth. Smith's departure from the case in 1998 after 18 months of investigation was marked by a letter in which he outlined his belief that there was substantial and credible evidence of an intruder and a lack of evidence implicating the Ramseys. He felt strongly that the investigation was being steered by preconceived notions rather than objective analysis. Lou Smith's work on the JonBenét Ramsey case had a lasting impact, keeping the intruder theory alive even as the case grew cold. His meticulous documentation and the evidence he gathered continue to be referenced by those who support the theory that JonBenét's killer was an unknown assailant who managed to evade detection. Smith's dedication to finding the truth, despite facing significant opposition, has cemented his legacy as a key figure in the ongoing mystery of JonBenét Ramsey's tragic death. Over the years, the JonBenét Ramsey case has seen numerous false leads, including several high-profile false confessions, which have significantly complicated the investigation. Among these, the confession of John Mark Carr stands out as one of the most bizarre and ultimately fruitless. In 2006, nearly a decade after JonBenét's death, John Mark Carr, a former schoolteacher, was arrested in Thailand after he contacted a University of Colorado professor and claimed to be responsible for JonBenét's murder.
Carr provided detailed accounts of the crime, which initially seemed credible to some investigators. He described elements of the crime scene and circumstances surrounding JonBenét's death that were not publicly known, leading to a brief surge of hope that the case might finally be solved.
However, as the investigation into Carr's claims progressed, several inconsistencies began to emerge. Notably, Carr's DNA did not match the DNA found at the crime scene, which had been a crucial piece of evidence pointing to an unknown assailant. Additionally, Carr's accounts of the events on the night of the murder were inconsistent with the established timeline, and there was no evidence that he had even been in Boulder, Colorado at the time of the crime. Eventually, it became clear that Carr's confession was a fabrication, likely motivated by a combination of mental health issues and a desire for notoriety. Carr was released, and his false confession was dismissed as a dead end. Carr's case was not the only false lead that plagued the investigation. Over the years, several other individuals falsely confessed to JonBenét's murder, each time diverting resources and attention away from other investigative avenues. These false confessions often garnered significant media attention, further complicating the public's perception of the case and adding to the already overwhelming amount of misinformation surrounding the investigation. Beyond the false confessions, the investigation also considered a range of other potential suspects. One early suspect was a neighbor who had a history of criminal behavior, but there was no evidence linking him to the crime. Other suspects included individuals who had been involved in similar crimes or who had exhibited suspicious behavior in the days leading up to JonBenét's death. However, in each case, the evidence was either insufficient or pointed elsewhere, leading investigators back to square one. The focus on these false leads and suspects not only consumed valuable time and resources, but also contributed to the case's complexity and the public's confusion. Each time a new suspect emerged or a confession was made, it reignited media interest and speculation, often overshadowing the ongoing efforts to piece together the truth from the available evidence. In summary, the investigation into JonBenét Ramsey's murder has been hindered by numerous false confessions and leads, including the high-profile case of John Mark Carr. These distractions have complicated the investigation, diverting attention from more promising avenues and contributing to the ongoing mystery that surrounds one of America's most infamous unsolved cases. The JonBenét Ramsey case has remained a focal point of public fascination and debate for nearly 3 decades, with various theories about what happened that night continuing to circulate widely in public forums and media. These theories can generally be divided into two broad categories: those that suggest involvement by the Ramsey family and those that support the intruder theory. Family involvement theories. From the outset, many people suspected that someone within the Ramsey family was responsible for JonBenét's death. This suspicion was fueled by several factors, including the unusual nature of the ransom note, the discovery of JonBenét's body inside the home, and the Ramseys' behavior following the crime. Theories involving the family typically fall into three main scenarios. Patsy Ramsey's involvement. One of the most prevalent theories is that Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét's mother, was involved in her death. Proponents of this theory suggest that Patsy may have accidentally killed JonBenét, possibly during a fit of anger or in an attempt to discipline her, and then staged the crime scene to make it look like a kidnapping gone wrong. The similarities between Patsy's handwriting and the ransom note have been cited as supporting evidence, though no conclusive match has ever been established. John Ramsey's involvement. Another theory posits that John Ramsey, JonBenét's father, may have been involved, either directly or in covering up the crime. Some speculate that John discovered an accidental or intentional act by another family member and chose to protect them by staging the scene. However, no solid evidence has ever emerged to implicate John directly. Burke Ramsey's involvement. There is also a theory that Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's older brother, may have accidentally killed his sister, possibly during a sibling altercation, and that the parents then covered up the crime to protect him. This theory gained significant attention, particularly after a CBS documentary suggested this scenario. However, Burke has consistently denied any involvement, and he later sued CBS for defamation, resulting in a settlement. Intruder theories. In contrast to the family involvement theories, the intruder theories suggest that an unknown assailant entered the Ramsey home and committed the crime. Several pieces of evidence have been cited in support of this theory. The open basement window. The basement window was found slightly open and a suitcase was positioned underneath it, leading some to believe that an intruder used this as a point of entry and exit. The scuff marks and broken glass near the window are often cited as supporting evidence. Unidentified DNA. One of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting the intruder theory is the presence of unidentified DNA on JonBenét's clothing and under her fingernails. This DNA does not match any of the Ramsey family members or anyone else known to be involved in the case, leading some to believe it belongs to the true perpetrator. Stun gun marks. Some experts believe that the small, circular marks found on JonBenét's body were made by a stun gun, which could have been used by an intruder to incapacitate her. This theory was strongly advocated by Detective Lou Smith, who was a vocal proponent of the intruder theory. Public opinion and media influence. Public opinion on the case has been deeply divided, largely shaped by extensive media coverage that has often been sensationalized. The media played a significant role in framing the narrative, with early reports focusing heavily on the Ramsey family as suspects. This narrative, combined with the unusual circumstances of the crime and the family's wealth and social status, has kept the case in the public eye for decades. Theories about the case continue to thrive in online forums, documentaries, books, and podcasts where amateur sleuths and true crime enthusiasts debate the details and propose new interpretations of the evidence. This ongoing public interest has kept the case alive in popular culture, with each new development or re examination of the evidence reigniting the conversation. Despite numerous investigations, media coverage, and public speculation, the JonBenét Ramsey case remains unsolved, and the true events of that tragic night are still shrouded in mystery. The persistence of these theories, both involving the family and an unknown intruder, reflects the deep fascination and unresolved nature of this infamous case. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey and the subsequent investigation had a profound and lasting impact on the Ramsey family, fundamentally altering their lives and subjecting them to intense public scrutiny and suspicion. The family's life post tragedy has been marked by grief, legal battles, and a continued quest for justice, all while trying to cope with the lingering shadow of one of America's most infamous unsolved cases. Patsy Ramsey's death. Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét's mother, was perhaps the family member most deeply affected by the tragedy. In the years following JonBenét's death, Patsy faced relentless public scrutiny, with many people, including some law enforcement officials, suspecting her involvement in the crime. Despite being officially cleared by DNA evidence in 2008, Patsy lived under the burden of these accusations until her death. Patsy passed away in 2006 from ovarian cancer, a battle she had been fighting on and off since before JonBenét's death. Her passing marked a somber chapter in the Ramsey family's story, as she went to her grave without seeing her daughter's killer brought to justice. Throughout her life, Patsy maintained her innocence and continued to support the investigation into JonBenét's death, hoping that the truth would one day emerge. John Ramsey's advocacy. John Ramsey, JonBenét's father, has also been deeply affected by the events that unfolded after his daughter's murder. In the wake of Patsy's death and the continued media attention, John became a vocal advocate for a thorough and unbiased investigation into JonBenét's murder. He has consistently pushed for the case to remain open and for new technologies and methods to be applied in the search for the truth. Despite the strain on his personal life, John has remained committed to clearing his family's name and finding his daughter's killer. Over the years, he has participated in numerous interviews and has even authored books discussing the case and his family's experiences. John's resilience in the face of immense public scrutiny has been a defining feature of his life post tragedy. Burke Ramsey's legal actions. Burke Ramsey, John Benet's older brother, was only 9 years old when his sister was killed. Although he was initially shielded from much of the public scrutiny due to his young age, Burke became the subject of widespread speculation and accusations as he grew older. Various theories, including those suggesting that he might have been involved in John Benet's death, began to circulate, fueled by media reports and documentaries. In response to these accusations, Burke has taken legal action against several media outlets that he believes defamed him. One of the most notable instances was his lawsuit against CBS in 2016 following the airing of a documentary that implied Burke's involvement in John Benet's death. Burke filed a $750 million defamation lawsuit, which was eventually settled out of court. These legal battles highlight the ongoing struggle the Ramsey family faces in defending their reputation against unfounded accusations. Enduring public scrutiny and legacy. The Ramsey family has endured decades of public scrutiny, with their every move and statement dissected by the media and the public. Despite being cleared of involvement in John Benet's death, the shadow of suspicion has never fully lifted, and the case continues to follow them. The legacy of the JonBenét Ramsey case is a complex one marked by tragedy, relentless public interest, and a family's enduring pain. The Ramsey story is a poignant reminder of the devastating effects that unsolved crimes can have on the families of victims, as well as the sometimes destructive power of media coverage. As the investigation into JonBenét's death continues, the Ramsey family remains committed to seeking justice, even as they navigate the challenges that have come to define their lives in the years since that fateful night in 1996. The JonBenét Ramsey case remains one of the most enduring and haunting mysteries in American true crime history. Despite decades of investigation, public scrutiny, and countless theories, the case stands unresolved. JonBenét's murder continues to captivate the public's imagination, not only because of the gruesome nature of the crime, but also due to the numerous unanswered questions that still linger. Today, the case is technically still open, with law enforcement agencies, including the Boulder Police Department and various cold case units, periodically reviewing the evidence. The advent of advanced forensic techniques, particularly in DNA analysis, has brought renewed hope that one day JonBenét's killer might be identified. Recent efforts, such as the digitization of case files and the application of modern DNA testing methods, suggest that the quest for justice is far from over. These ongoing efforts are crucial not only for the Ramsey family, who have endured decades of suspicion and grief, but also for the broader pursuit of justice. Solving the JonBenét Ramsey case would represent more than just bringing closure to a tragic chapter in the lives of those involved. It would be a significant achievement in the field of criminal justice, demonstrating the power of perseverance and the importance of continually applying new technologies to cold cases. For the Ramsey family, who have lived under a cloud of suspicion for nearly 3 decades, a resolution would finally allow them to move beyond the pain and public scrutiny that has defined their lives since that fateful day in 1996. The case also serves as a stark reminder of the impact that media and public opinion can have on an investigation. The relentless media coverage has both helped and hindered the case, bringing attention to potential leads while also contributing to the spread of misinformation and the stigmatization of the Ramsey family. In conclusion, the JonBenét Ramsey case stands as a symbol of unresolved tragedy, but it also represents the enduring hope that justice can still be achieved, no matter how much time has passed. The ongoing efforts to solve this case are a testament to the determination of those who seek the truth and to the importance of finding answers for the sake of both the family and the principles of justice. The quest for justice continues, and with it, the hope that one day JonBenét's killer will be identified and held accountable for their actions.